Bard on the Plains podcast with Mike McPeak. It's about stories, mine and yours.
I will always remember my first love, not my girlfriend, my car. My first girlfriend was memorable, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. My first car was an important part of my life. It meant freedom and independence. I also thought it was instrumental in getting a girlfriend. I was driving the folks' station wagon, which if I would have had a girlfriend, would have provided a whole world of possibilities. But since it was a station wagon, it prevented me from getting a girlfriend. It's a whole catch-22 scenario. No, I wasn't convinced that it was the station wagon that was preventing me from finding someone. I knew in the back of my head it was probably me, but it was easier to blame the car. This is teenage logic. The same teenage logic that said if I went out for wrestling, I would get a girlfriend. So you can see two things here. One, I was obsessed with getting a girlfriend, and two, I have really bad logic skills. But putting that aside, I still wanted a car really bad to call my own. That one that I could do whatever I wanted to with, which since I was a broke teenager, that wasn't a lot. But still, I wanted one and kept looking and bugging the folks about getting one. Finally, I found one car in Watertown. It was a gold 1969 Oldsmobile two-door Cutlass S. The S stood for sports. It looked like a dream car to me, but in reality, it was only so-so. It cost $400. I didn't realize until I got home that the frame was twisted. It had been owned by a friend of my brother's, so I got the story on it. Apparently, he drove it into the ditch at a rather high rate of speed. Of course, I didn't find out any of this until I'd bought it, but I still didn't let it deter me any. I tried to compensate for one side being higher than the other by putting risers in the spring on one side to raise it up. It did work, but it didn't do much for the ride. It had cloth bucket seats with an automatic transmission on the console. There was only an AM radio in there, but I fixed that by installing an 8-track player. I didn't realize it at the time, but 8-tracks were on the way out and cassette tapes were the new hotness. I installed 2 speakers in the rear window deck. To complete the look, I had a little stuffed gopher I had won for selling stuff for some fundraiser that I can't remember. So I took some lumber and popsicle sticks and made a recliner for him so he could sit in my console and be my co-pilot. Okay, it's a little dopey, but I was a teenager, on my way to being an adult, but not quite done being a kid. So picture it. I'm in my car. I got my co-pilot with me, cruising down the road with Boston's Peace of Mind blasting out speakers in the back. I thought it was cool. In reality, I really wasn't, but I didn't really care at the time. I could be my own man. Well, as much of a man as Mom and Dad would let me be, but it was the start. The car was my way of expressing myself. So I had to go for a co-pilot that wasn't dorky, right? But I did the usual teenage things. I drag raced, and I got my butt whooped because my car was faster in my mind than it was in reality. And I laid some black marks with it, not because the engine was so powerful, but because I would put it in reverse back up and then slam it in the drive to get the tires to spin. Again, teenage logic. I only did it once, so the transmission never failed on me. If I'm going to be honest, and I do have a habit of doing that, I will admit to some underage drinking and driving. Wasn't as frowned upon back then, but still really stupid. Did it get me a girl? No. That's more the owner's fault than the car's. But alas, as many of first loves go, it fades and you start looking for something new. So I moved on to my next great love, a blue 1979 Chevy Blazer. That was only a year old. It was a demo vehicle that the dealership in town had. There was 10,000 miles on it. Dad had passed away, so I was getting an SSI check, so I had a little money to spend. I also had a little bit more freedom to do things since he wasn't around to remind me about the work I had to do. That wasn't a good thing. Mom did keep me in line, so I didn't go completely crazy, but I did more to this vehicle. I put the 8-track player in there. No, I still wasn't giving up on cassette tapes yet. But this time I put the speaker in the doors and speakers under the seats, so I had quad sound. I put a sunscreen mural in the back windows of an eagle flying over a mountain. A blue bug guard went on the hood to keep bugs off the windshield. I wanted the car to be a little sportier, so I took it to the muffler shop and had the headers and dual exhaust glass pack mufflers put on, and the pipes came out just in front of the back wheels. I thought it was great fun to pull alongside small cars and rev the engine so it shook the car windows. I had my share of adventures in this car, and more drinking and driving. Not underage because I had turned 18, which in South Dakota at the time was the legal drinking age for low alcohol content beer. So older, but still no wiser. Since it was four-wheel drive, I did some off-roading. There was a removable hardtop to it, so I could take that on and off and have a convertible. I didn't do that often because it was hard to get off by myself, and I did scratch the paint doing it. So you're wondering, did I finally get a girlfriend? Yes, but not because of the car. A friend of mine got tired of me whining about not having anyone, so he fixed me up with a blind date. I was with her for a couple months, but sadly that came to an end. And so did my relationship with the Blazer a few months later. Like some love affairs, it ends out of necessity. I still liked it, but the gas mileage was horrible, like tens of miles to the gallon. We were in the middle of an energy crisis, and the gas price had shot up to the unbelievable price of $2 a gallon. Looking back, it almost seems cheap now, but at the time it was a major cost. So while I was going to Votech in Watertown, I started looking around. Finally, I found a blue 1979 Datsun, not yet Nissan, 200SX. It had a 4-cylinder 5-speed, as opposed to the Blazer's 250 cubic inch engine, quad-jet carburetor, and an automatic transmission. It was small and light, and the gas mileage was great. I did put the 8-track player in there, although it was finally replaced by a cassette player because I finally had to concede that 8-track tapes are dead. Outside of hanging my tassels from my graduation hat in the mirror, I didn't do much to personalize this car. There was a sunroof, though. There had to be because there was no air conditioning in it. Actually, it had 2 interchangeable hatches. One was solid metal, and the other one was glass so the light could come in. Whichever one wasn't being used was put in a protective sleeve and stored in the trunk. You could either pop it out to let the air flow through or remove it completely for a quasi-convertible feel. So I suppose you all are asking the question, did this finally get me a girl? Well, I met someone, but not because of the car. She liked me for who I was, not what I drove. So there's a lesson to be learned here. I've been with this woman who eventually became my wife for the last 38 years, which is more than I can say about the cars I had. But no, it wasn't because of the car. She liked the car, but she never drove it because it had a manual transmission and a small engine. So she could never get the hang of letting out the clutch and stepping on the gas in the right mixture so as not to stall it or lurch forward and get whiplash. We had that car for a few years until we started a family and realized that a small 2-door car was not going to work well as a family car. We went out shopping and settled on a burgundy Jeep Cherokee. I don't remember what year it was. There's not much to say about this one. We bought it used, and since we were young, married, and broke, we didn't do much with it. The only thing I do remember about it was when the windshield got cracked. We were driving down the road that was being chipped and repaved. There was a car coming at us, and I still recall it clearly. When we got to just the right spot, the rear tire of the oncoming car picked up a chip of asphalt and flung it at the windshield. I could see it coming and couldn't do a thing about it. It chipped the windshield, and by the time we got where we were going, the crack had spread all the way across the glass. We had that car for a few years. It was starting to develop a few mechanical issues, which were fixable, but then we found out we were going to have our third child and realized that the Jeep wasn't going to cut it. We went vehicle shopping and settled on something new. It was brand new, our very first new vehicle that either one of us had ever bought. And since it was a family vehicle, it was, guess what, a minivan. And I was okay with that. I finally had the girl, 2 if you count my daughter, and didn't have anything to prove. We just needed something roomier and was dependable. We got a blue 1996 Ford Windstar van. Didn't customize it very much except for the console we bought to put between the front seats to hold Kleenexes and other kid accessories. We kept that van for a number of years. Since it was a van, not only did it haul kids, but we would take the seats out and use it to haul lumber and other material for building projects. We even used it to haul 5-gallon pails of dirt back to the house for a flower garden we were building. It moved us into town, my in-laws a couple times, my mother to town, and several kids to college and back. We had that car until 2011 when I bought my next car, but we still kept it in the family. My son drove it until he got my mom's Ford Explorer. Then it was passed on to my daughter Emily. She used it to go to college and to start her life of adulting. But sadly, nothing lasts forever. This car was starting to have problems and was starting to get costly to maintain. So she sold it to the salvage yard. She called me up to tell me. We both knew it was just an inanimate object, but we still choked up a little bit. There was lots of memories in that vehicle, both happy and sad. It was the one we bought to bring her home from the hospital in, and now she was the one letting it go. It was a father-daughter bonding moment. But we also realized time moves on and we would be okay with it. So the next vehicle I bought to replace the Blueberry, as Emily had called the van, was a blue 2010 Chevy Equinox. Mom had passed away, so I had some money and decided to get this. Deb had a Toyota Sienna van that she had bought when she started working at the school, so this was a me vehicle. I hadn't bought a vehicle just for myself since the Datsun 30 years before. I liked the Equinox. It was 4-cylinder and only front-wheel drive because, again, I was thinking about gas mileage. It had some tech things that I liked, such as Bluetooth so I could connect my phone and play music rather than having to listen to the radio or a bunch of tapes lying around in the console. And I forgot to mention, the Blueberry finally had a built-in cassette player. The Equinox, on the other hand, had moved on from cassettes to CDs, but I never bothered with them much. Like I said, I liked the car, but all good things come to an end. It was about 8 years old. It had had 3 recall notices, one for bad O-rings in the fuel injector, another for timing chain that would stretch and cause problems, and the last one was to have new piston rings put in because of a manufacturing defect. The deciding factor was when we had a wheel bearing replaced, and I got the feeling that this might be the beginning of a string of repairs. Also, Deb had bought a brand new Toyota Highlander, and it kind of got me thinking about a new car. I made the mistake of looking at new cars while the Equinox was being fixed. I saw a nice red Toyota RAV4. I liked it. There was a sunroof like the Datsun, but this one was electric. It had all-wheel drive like the Blazer and the Jeep instead of the front-wheel drive of the Equinox. It didn't have the cargo space that the Blueberry had, but the back seat would fold down so you could put more things in there. And unlike most all the other cars I ever owned except for the Cutlass and the Jeep, this one was red. And what about the Cutlass, you ask? How does this car compare to that one? Well, there is something from the Cutlass, my little co-pilot. He hasn't been in all the cars, and there's no room for him to sit in the RAV4, I checked. But I still have him sitting down here in my computer room, still being my silent co-pilot. And as I'm writing this, it occurs to me that I have never given him a proper name. I should fix that. How about I call him Willie, like in Willow Lake? If you want to see a picture of him, go to bardontheplains.com and check him out. And then there will be the car that no one likes to talk about, the one I call the last ride limo service. But I'm sure there will be several more cars in my future before then, and that is the story to be written later. But until then, keep all 4 wheels on the ground, stay between the lines, and always have a co-pilot. But until next time, remember, you are the author of your own story.
If you have a story you'd like to tell, contact Mike on Twitter at BardOnThePlains or by email at bardontheplains@gmail.com. For more information about the stories in this podcast, visit bardontheplains.com.